It's Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025. We have two isolated severe risk of weather out here. Both are going to be marginal. One is going to be out here in parts of the Midwest and Great Lakes region, and the other one is going to be out here in parts of the northern Rockies to the northern plains. And then there are expected to be widespread thunderstorms across much of the United States, except through a corridor right here through the southern and central plains, the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys, and a small corridor up going into the northeast. Today is mostly going to be a conditional wind risk with two 5% slight chances of severe winds out here in the Midwest and Great Lakes region, then back up here in the northern Rockies into the northern plains, bringing potentially gusts upwards of 60 miles an hour. And then we only have one risk of hail, and that is going to be a 5% slight risk of hail out here in the Midwest into the Great Lakes region. So very small hail, mostly quarter sized. And then our day 2 risk has 3 isolated risk of severe weather, one out here in the northern plains, Great Lakes region, and then up into the northeast, and also widespread thunderstorms across much of the United States. So although our severe threat isn't super robust, it still exists. Here's our simulated reflectivity from our Midwest and Great Lakes region. We can see that around lunchtime, we're going to get storm initiation out here in parts of eastern Wisconsin and central Michigan, and these are going to push across the Great Lakes into western Michigan, and they will bring that wind risk and a slightly small hail risk. And then up here in parts of central Minnesota and northern Wisconsin, we could see a couple of organized storms, which could also bring that wind risk and possibly the risk of some small isolated hail. This is going to be fueled by some troughing a cold front, then an area of high pressure, which will bring some mid-level flow to these storms and possibly help to organize them, as well as on the periphery of this high pressure system, there could be an area of increased moisture for these storms. Then as those storms dissipate into the night hours, we could see another area of increased activity out here in parts of central Iowa, possibly initiated from some convergence along a outflow boundary. But it looks like this wouldn't be severe and it will mostly just bring a lot of rain and a couple of strong gusts. The most intriguing area of storms tomorrow out here is going to be in the northern Rockies to the Midwest. There's going to be a low pressure system spinning back here in parts of southwestern Idaho, which will be a factor of kicking up storms along with some troughing moving through the region around midday. And at first, these storms will likely just be scattered and messy. That low is actually going to move up here to parts of eastern Idaho, but it looks like some favorable storm interactions could occur with some straightened photographs, which would also be enhanced by an area of high pressure like in our Midwest and Great Lakes region, which would also bring some mid-level shear to these storms and would help with some organization. And by around the late afternoon to early evening hours, we could see a strong line of storms out here all the way in eastern Montana. And it looks like these storms would bring almost exclusively a wind threat. And these would also be along a small frontal boundary, kind of a pseudo dry line as well. But really, it would be our upper plains convergence zone. And it looks like these storms won't last for a super long time in their severe state, and they will probably fall apart by the early night hours. But until then, pretty much the entire eastern side of Montana will definitely be at risk for severe winds, but possibly a increased area up here in northeastern Montana. Here are 500 millbar winds, and we can see very clearly that our activity up here in the Midwest Great Lakes region is going to be enhanced by a short wave moving through the region, which will bring some of that large scale forcing. Then back up here in our northern Rockies to northern plains risk area, we also see another short wave moving through the region, which will also help to enhance that storm activity and initiate those storms up there. And the last thing I want to point out is we do see our model trying to pick up on some low pressure down here in the Gulf, which is actually going to be associated with an area of possible development of tropical weather, which we will speak on in a bit. This is a photograph from our Midwest to Great Lakes region, and it's actually taken from parts of western Michigan, and we can see that our photograph isn't super indicative of any certain types of severe weather, but however, we do see a bit of a elongation in our photograph, which could help with that storm organization. Our low level shear is going to be low, our low level helicity is going to be low, but our bulk shear is also going to appear to be lower, but I think it will probably be closer to 30 to 35 knots, which would help with storm organization. And another thing that could help with that are some splitting storms brought by our straighter photographs, which could also help with storm interactions and possibly organizing those storms better. We don't see pretty much any veering in our winds, which could be indicative of a less organized storm mode. And then our moisture isn't going to be super high, but it's definitely still going to be enough to foster that threat of severe winds with a 62 dew point. Some very little dry air loft, which could help to support a threat of severe winds, but it's almost negligible with how small it is. But we do have a somewhat juiced up air mass at around 2000 cape. Then our 3 cape is going to be nearing 200, which will also help to fuel that threat of severe winds. And our precipitable water is going to be 1.26 inches, which will also help to fuel that threat of severe winds. And the last thing is that we do have a bit of cape near our freezing layer. Our freezing layer isn't going to be too high off the ground, and our mid-level lapse rates are going to be pretty low, but they're nearing 7 Celsius decreasing per kilometer. So that is why there is that threat of some quarter-sized hail out here in the Midwest to Great Lakes region, along with the pockets of greater bulk shear that we're also expecting out there. Here is weather sounding from our northern Rockies to northern plains risk area. And our photograph is not going to be super special, but we do see a decent elongation in it, which will be a reason for those storm splitting and storm interactions, as well as indication of possibly some more organized storms once they stop splitting. And then we see that we have very low level helicity and low level shear. Our bulk shear is going to be pretty much at that 40 knot threshold, which would mean some more organized storms. Our lowest cloud level is going to be quite high, which would be indicative of a threat for severe winds. We see some very weak veering in our winds, which could help to organize those storms. Our low level lapse rates are going to be very high, and our mid level lapse rates are also going to be very high at 9.1 Celsius, decreasing per kilometer. However, our freezing layer is going to be quite high, and we don't really have that much cape near our freezing layer, so that threat for hail out there is going to be pretty much zero. We do see not a whole lot of moisture out there, which is going to be one of the hindrances for these storms tomorrow. And then we see a tad bit of dry air aloft, which could possibly mix down as we get some daytime heating. It's expected to be 98 degrees out there, so very hot. So all of that could possibly help to support that threat of severe winds. Our cape isn't going to be super crazy, but it is going to be over that 1,000 threshold for storms, and our precipitable water is going to be 1.22 inches, coupled with a downdraft cape of nearing 1,700. So another reason why that threat for severe winds could absolutely be realized in this region. But I think the main hindrances for our storms out here are going to be our lower moisture. Despite it being in a higher elevation, I think that high 50s dew points would be needed to really see these storms reach their maximum potential. But I do definitely think out here in the northern Rockies to southern plains, there is absolutely going to be a couple of storms producing severe winds. The last thing we're going to look at is our tropical outlook, and we still have that area of possible development along the Florida coast. And interestingly, the National Hurricane Center has actually gone ahead and upgraded that chance to 30. It was 20 yesterday. So increased confidence of possibly some tropical development out here in this region is definitely increasing. And something interesting, we can actually kind of see some spinach on the HRRR. I want you to look right here where we're going to see some spinning. As I move through, we're going to see that storm spinning, which is kind of that visual representation of why the National Hurricane Center thinks some tropical weather could possibly develop off the coast of Florida. And this will be enhanced by kind of a stalling front up here, which will help to increase spin with this storm. However, it is only a 30% chance of development, and a lot of the models aren't really clinging on to anything super organized happening, so it's probably not something to worry about.